Well, hi, everybody. I'm your host, Jay Jennings, and we've got a very special episode for you today where we'll be discussing the four Mummy Kharis films, the ones that came after the Boris Karloff classic in 32. And to join me, like always, to share his analysis and expertise on these films, the one and the only Courtney Joyner.
Hey Jay, and I am ready to explore the Scripps Museum.
Well, the Scripps Museum, right, where they keep popping up just when you think Kharis is dead and buried. The Scripps Museum sends another ambassador, and it's time to bring Kharis back from the dead again. But this is a show we've been looking forward to. And at first, we were going to do just the Lon Chaney mummy films, but I thought, nah, I can't leave Tom Tyler sitting home alone waiting to do his thing. So we're going to include him, one Tom Tyler, and three Lon Chaney's equals four Kharis movies. And we're going to dissect them one by one. And we're going to just say right off the bat that they were not sequels. People in the know they weren't sequels. They are basically separate films. Although one could say, Court, that The Mummy's Hand from 1940, the first film that with Tom Tyler, could actually be a remake of The Mummy. What do you think about that one?
Well, that was the film where they tried to duplicate scenes from the Carl Front film, and even had Tyler doubling in sequences, replacing Boris Karloff, and they edited around it. So there was definitely much more of a connection with The Mummy's Hand to The Mummy than with any of the Lon Chaney pictures, and those were all connected to The Mummy's Hand. So I absolutely I agree with you, because they do kind of just restate this entire thing of Kharis being driven by his mad love for the Princess Ananka and all of that stuff. So they that was always kind of the great motivating factor. Kharis, he wanted his girlfriend.
Right. Well, Kharis was addicted to two things: Princess Ananka and those damn Tana leaves.
You bet.
So if he couldn't have one, he'd have to have the other. And he even increased his addiction from three Tana leaves to seven to nine. And when he takes nine, no one can control him. But anyway,
It's
we're
seven
yes.
for life, nine for mobility. I think that's right.
It was two for speech, three for his dance moves, four to increase his heart rate, five to take a nap, and nine to kill everybody he sees. So, but anyway, we're going to go through all his films, all the Mummy films, the four films, the Kharis films, not including the Hammer Kharis one. That's a whole different ball game. But the Universal Kharis films, The Mummy's Hand in 1940, The Mummy's Tomb in 42, The Mummy's Ghost in 44, and then once again, The Mummy's Curse in 44. Did I get all those right, Order Court?
Yes, you did.
I was worried about that. And usually what we do on this show is I give a synopsis of the film or the actor, just a little rough background, and then Court steps in with his expertise and what he knows, and the people that he's met and the stories that he has, which are second to none, which I think are fantastic. And then at the end of the show, we always have a memorabilia section. And on tonight's show, we're going to have, Court and I are going to be sharing our bust collection. And so I have my Universal busts, which you see behind me, and Court has some AIP ones. So that should be fun. And we'll do that at the end of the show, kind of like at the podcast after dinner mint. But let's get to the show at hand, Court. And I'm going to say real quick, in my best John Carradine voice, "Hear me, O mighty gods of Egypt. I swear by the mighty power of Amun-Ra, whose anger can shatter the world, and by the dread horror of Set, that I should never forsake my trust as a priest of the Arkham."
There you go.
Thank you. But we will say one thing before I introduce the Mummy's Hand, that all these films, Court, had great ongoing themes. Egyptian music running throughout, a sense of doom, very atmospheric, great sinister organ music, archaeologists who might have survived earlier mummy movies but then are killed by Kharis in the following movie. And some of the Kharis movies are set up with a prologue of looking into the mist or into the magical Tana leaves fog, and how Kharis became a mummy. And what's interesting, I always think, is in Ghost, as opposed to just being summoned, he just appears after the smell of Tana leaves, right, Court?
Yes, he does, which was actually a source of friction between Reginald Leborg, the director, and Ben Pivar, who produced every single one of these movies.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And we'll talk about that. Reggie Labor, Christy Caban,
Harold Young,
Harold Young, and the Goodwin. What's his first name, Court?
Leslie Goodwins.
Leslie Goodwin's. And so they all had their own style, but they're all still very creepy. They all, if you thought that one guy directed them all, you'd believe it, because they all kind of kept that same noirish, atmospheric look, which I think is great. And I think, Court, if I'm not wrong, that was Reggie Leborg's first film.
Oh, Mummy's Ghost was, yes, it was. It was his first feature, and he had been doing musical shorts, and in fact had directed a musical short that won the Academy Award. Heavenly
Wow.
Music.
Okay. So we'll talk about the Mummy's Hand first, as I'm going to show random, I guess, screenshots from it. But usually, first, what I do is I give a synopsis about the Mummy's Hand, and as I said, I'll just show random photos, and hopefully they'll come out as I talk. The Mummy's Hand, yeah, 1940, American black and white horror film directed by Christy Caban, and it was produced by Ben Pivar for Universal Studios. Of course, we know the story. An Egyptian mystic named Andoheb, there he is, George Zucco, who was ordered by his high priest, the great Eduardo Cianelli, to guard over the mummy of Kharis, played by Tom Tyler, and he's been kept alive by a brew of Tana leaves. Meanwhile, archaeologist Steve Banning, played by Dick Foran, and Babe Jensen, played by the always funny Wallace Ford, try to persuade the magician Salvani, played by Cecil Calloway, to finance an expedition in search of Ananka's, sarcophagus. But they're joined by the daughter, Salvani's daughter, Marta, played by Peggy Moran, who and Andoheb, disguised as a professor of Egyptology at the Cairo Museum. Kharis is ordered to kill off all the expedition members. Dr. Petrie, played by Charles Trowbridge, and Ali, Leon Belesco, while Andoheb becomes attracted to Marta, who he plans to kidnap and make immortal. And one thing is for sure, in this first film, this is George Zucco's show. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And of course, he became also a fixture in at least 3 of these films. And but this was, Mummy's Hand was put together really kind of out of a bizarre necessity, thanks to James Whale, because his film Green Hell, from which most of these sets were built, had been a financial disaster. And Universal was looking for some way to recoup costs. They looked to Ben Pivar, who was running the B unit. And they were just starting, the Lon Chaney had not hit yet as a horror star. So Pivar was really doing a lot of kind of action adventure movies with people like Andy Devine and Richard Arlen.
And Court, real quick, speaking of sets, how about this one where Zucco walks up those ancient steps?
Oh, I love this. Yeah, this was, again, they were looking at things that were on the lot. Let's stitch something together. And they went to Maxwell Shane to write this script. And he was really a crime writer. And later on, movies like Fear in the Night with DeForest Kelley and things like, he was really a top flight guy. And he concocted really this entire template of mythology around Kharis and the Princess Ananka and every priest representing the high priest of Archon who gets too horny and screws everything up, which is literally every single movie.
Right. Let's talk about, I guess he was already famous as a cowboy star. He made a lot of Westerns. How about Tom Tyler actually did a fantastic job in the role as almost replacing Imhotep?
Well, and also one of the reasons Tyler was cast, of course, is because he did have that kind of thin face and these cat-like eyes. And this is not very long after, of course, he is the baddie in Stagecoach.
Right.
So, and there's always been this nonsense about Tyler's arthritis being so terrible, and he did have arthritis, that is true, but that had crippled him up. That's why he had to take the role of the mummy, and so because he couldn't find work anywhere else. Get out of here with that stuff. He played Captain Marvel after he played the mummy, so yeah, that kind of blows that out of the water. Although Tyler did suffer from arthritis, and I know it afflicted him later in his life. But this idea that he was too infirm to do anything else, which has been repeated and repeated and repeated, is just nonsense.
He had great style in this film. I mean, the clutched hand, the way he walked. He actually had more movement in this film. I mean, the Mummy did, Kharis, before the other ones where Cheney took over and he just stumbled around, leaving, bandages in his wake. But in this one, he actually made a little, I mean, he was still slow, but he wasn't as infirmed as in the movies to follow.
Well, again, the slight bit of continuity between the Mummy pictures, and specifically the Mummy's tomb, is, of course, at the end of this film, they set him on fire. So when they resurrect him as Lon Chaney, he's all messed up and he's
He's
scarred.
got one eye.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's a mess. But and speaking of the eyes, I still have no idea why exactly they did that wonderful animated blackening of Kairos' eyes in this film. But it really is striking, and it is. That's genuinely creepy. It's
Even this still is creepy. This film has atmosphere, just like you'd expect from a Universal horror film. I think between you and me, Court, it's probably the best made. I wouldn't say maybe with the story, but I think continuity, acting, and overall as a horror film for the 40s, I think it's the best. Not, as I said, not my favorite, but it's probably the best made mummy film out of the four. What's your take?
I'm always. We're gonna open up the giant board can of worms because I've always been a big champion of the Mummy's Tomb.
Oh, that's the follow up.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that afterwards. This is not my favorite. My favorite's with Virginia Christine. It's The Mummy's Curse. Of course, we've discussed that before off camera. But I just think as far as photography and story, this one is very underrated in my opinion, just with the photography and stuff.
Well, again, because of the Doug Fairbanks, Vincent Price, Joan Bennett movie, George Sanders also, that James Whale had made that had not done well, suddenly the Mummy's Hand inherited all of that great production value. And people, when they see that incredible altar with the gods, overlooking everything, it looks like oh, that's so fantastic, they did this great thing for Mummy Pictures. No, they did it for another movie and they were trying to get some of their money back, but Mummy's Hand benefited.
Right. And one of my favorite shots of Tom Tyler is this one here. I actually have this one signed, which is, I love this photo so much. It's probably his best pose. I mean, he has other ones, but in my opinion, it just sums up the horror of the Mummy by Tom Tyler. Little background: The Mummy's Hand was made obviously after the financial success of two other Universal films, Son of Frankenstein and The Invisible Man Returns. And so the studio decided to make a follow-up to The Mummy. The film was described as having a modest budget, and it was. $80,000 isn't a lot of money. And they went over budget by a measly 4,000, Court.
And well, and again, going to Ben Pivar, and he had a long history at Universal. His brother was the head of the editorial department. In fact, his brother was the film editor of the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. So, and they were British, interestingly, not this kind of idea that there are these cigar chomping, inarticulate mugs who were running Universal, because that
Right.
was never the case. But this was going to be a modest picture. It was, and it did surprisingly well. And so suddenly, let's launch it. And by the time they did Mummy's Tomb, Lon Chaney had already hit the Wolfman, and everybody was off to the races,
Well,
or
let's talk about George Zucco in the
to
yes.
the races.
Let's talk about the great George Zucco in this film. Once again, he steals the show, and it's just we've actually covered him obviously in our previous uh, podcast in length about George Zucco. But let's reiterate again how he's almost in every. Is he? I think he's in every one, or is he missing from one court?
He's not in Mummy's Curse.
Okay, but and then he switches roles. He actually takes over the Eduardo Cianelli role, if I'm not mistaken, Court.
He does, and very nice Jack Pierce makeup in Tomb and in Mummy's Ghost.
Right. I always liked him in his fez. So our show cannot be complete without showing a photo of that, of course. So Lampini and then as Andoheb.
There's a little bit of a biological problem when Wally Ford shoots him and he falls down those long steps up to the temple. His hair grows back while he is falling down the steps, and then when he lands at the bottom, it's bald George Zucco again.
Right. And he's very sinister. I mean, here he is trying to inject Peggy Moran. Is that with Tonaleve syrup? Tonaleve syrup?
Well, it's
Syrup.
that priests of Arkham, fluid that makes you immortal and fall in love with the George Zucco
Oh,
stuff.
that's right. That's right. It's
Yeah.
all about. You know what? That's right, Court. You touched upon it. Someone's always horny for Ananka.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Who wouldn't be? We got Peggy Moran, Elise Knox, Virginia Christine, and of course my ex-wife Ramsey Ames.
And Ramsey Ames. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too. It's like, of course, why would this hot Princess Ananka be interested in an old bag of dust like Kharis? Come on.
Right, there's got to be better guys out there. Great shot of both the high priest and Andoheb, where he makes him promise that you will watch over Kharis and that he fulfills his destiny. And then later, George Zucco, was it the next film and the film after, takes over this role. I
Yes,
guess
yeah.
you're not supposed to notice that, but he does. But they just had a great camaraderie. It's a great. It's just a great. It almost reminds me of the Shazam serial. Remember where Shazam is discovered and he sees the old man in the cave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's I guess the Captain Marvel, Tom Tyler
I
connection
was going to
there.
say, there's your Tom Tyler connection.
Right.
And this movie, because of the chemistry between Peggy Moran and Dick Foran, was so good that they teamed them again for Horror Island.
Right. Horror Island, which we'll talk about in a future show. Let's talk about some of the other cast members of this. It stars Dick Foran. And who's the gentleman next to him? I forgot, Court.
Charles Trowbridge.
Right. And here they're examining a dormant. He goes, he feels lifelike. Yeah, almost like he was alive 5 minutes ago. How does Dick Foran? Do you think he did a good job in this picture, Court?
Oh, yeah. He was just a really good, solid kind of all-American guy. I think probably the most prominent movie that he was in where he played a really major role was he is the young man who is in love with Betty Davis in The Petrified Forest.
Oh, okay, that's right. And then
And
later, yeah.
and he was at Warner Brothers for quite some time. And he had, by the way, a wonderful singing voice. So he did musical westerns at Warner Brothers and things. So when he came over to Universal, they were putting him in serials like Riders of Death Valley and then this series of adventure pictures and some of the horror movies. But no, Dick Foran was great.
Right. And he's actually Nick Foran, if I'm not mistaken. His name was Nick, and he changed it to Dick for some reason. Anyway, now that this is later, same Kharis, but now instead of Dick Foran, unfortunately, when you see Andoheb, you know your end is near, right, Court?
Oh, yes.
Because we know what happens next. Kharis wakes up. He hasn't choked anyone in a while, and he ends the doctor's, I guess, medical career. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. It's really atmospheric. There's even here's a shot of the spookiness where they're going into the cave court.
Effendi, Effendi.
Where art thou, Effendi?
Yep.
But anyway, so we're talking about our first of the four Universal Kharis mummy films, of course, The Mummy's Hand. And we'll show a few more photos before we move on. Here's another great shot of Tom Tyler, which just shows he did have the facial structure. If you think about it, he's more muscular and looks, I think, better than Lon Chaney. I hate to say that because I'm a huge Chaney fan, but Chaney was a little kind of chubby and the bandages were falling off. But Tom looks fit, and that's a fit mummy right there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The
So,
and this is the thing too. That these movies, when they were made by journeyman personnel, written by journeyman personnel. Here's your assignment: go to work. We want to do a mummy picture, so you go figure out a way to do it. And Christy Cabani, who directed this, of course, going all the way back, he was an assistant to D.W. Griffith, and he was the co-director of the very famous movie with Raoul Walsh, where they went down to Mexico and actually made a film with Pancho Villa.
oh,
And
interesting.
yes, that was, and Villa was in it himself, as were the execution of Federale soldiers and all of this. But Cabani was another one of these guys like Alan Dwan. I mean, he was a real adventurer at the birth of the movies.
Right.
And he was the guy they chose to direct this picture because by this time he was doing B pictures at Universal.
Right, and this is what is one of his most known ones. Of course,
Absolutely.
we would no show is complete without the mention of Michael Mark.
Of course.
He's in almost every Universal film you could think of, and here he's selling a vase to Dick Foran, and he wants $80 for it, which is a ripoff, and he's upset. He's like, "Oh, I'm only selling this for $80," and
But you
yeah,
notice Dick is wearing that new suit and that fedora. So this is actually a shot from the very end of the movie.
wow, okay, so it's not that scene at the beginning in the marketplace.
No, this is here. They're now hot shots, and they get to go back to their big careers in the States in the museum, and he gets to marry Peggy Moran and all kinds of fun.
Right. And then, of course, where would be without we always show two, um, I guess, bits of ephemera from the movie. So I'm going to show the lobby card for The Mummy's Hand. This was in color. That's always fun. That's a part where Dick is searching there in the cave, but that's a big hand claw there. And then he
Yeah,
turns around and there's Kharis. And this is a great card. I can't show the whole thing, it won't fit on the screen, but it's just very colorful and artsy in its
and
yellow tint.
because Lon Chaney was not in this film, that was one of the reasons that Real Art did not reissue this movie in the 1950s. It was the only mummy picture, in fact, that was not reissued, as they felt it didn't have any exploitable elements.
Okay.
I have one lobby card from The Mummy's Hand, and it's really like the entire cast in the bazaar when they start the big brawl in the restaurant, and Cecil Calloway's in there and everybody. So it's not a mummy shot. Although I do have a Dick Foran autograph, and it is with that still of Tom Tyler strangling him.
So that concludes our discussion of The Mummy's Hand, the first of the Kharis movies. And then now coming up is The Mummy's Tomb, which I'll be showing screenshots of, and Court will be giving his recollections of what he remembers about it and when he saw it and stuff. So, as far as uh, a a synopsis, the Mummy's Hand. I'm sorry, we just did The Mummy's Hand. I have to fire my technical director. The Mummy's Tomb, 42 American horror film, directed by Harold Young. What else did he direct, Court?
Well, Harold Young came to Universal. He was a very successful film editor. He was an American, but he made his career in England. And he was cutting movies for Alexander Korda. I mean, you couldn't get any bigger than that. And the first film he made as a director was The Scarlet Pimpernel with Leslie Howard. I mean, that was pretty big stuff. And he came here, and I think one of the reasons, even though he was already directing movies for the B unit at Universal, but I think one of the reasons they gave him The Mummy's Tomb is that there is, a fair amount of footage at the beginning of the movie from the mummy's hand, and they wanted somebody with an editing background to integrate new footage with that stuff and find a way to, make it all fit into the movie, which he did very well. And he also directed The Frozen Ghost,
Oh,
The
okay.
Intersection, and Jungle Captive.
So he
Good.
did some films. I
Yeah.
knew he sounded familiar. So it's the 42 is American, as I said, Mummy's Tomb, directed by Harold Young, and this was the first one where they got Lon Chaney Jr. to take over the role as Kharis, and he finished out the series. This movie takes place 30 years after The Mummy's Hand, so that would make it 1972. But as Court and I discussed before the show, chronological years and when things take place weren't really on the mindset of Universal at the time.
New.
It was still the 40s. So where Ando had basically survived, even though he was shot dead and fell down 50 different concrete steps to his death, and his eyes were wide open, he was dead. They bring him back, Andoheb, and he survived, right?
Only crushed my arm.
He plans revenge on Stephen Banning, and who's Dick Foran and his entire family in Mapleton, Massachusetts. And so, with the help of the high priest Turhan Bey, Andoheb and the mummy Kharis take up. Well, Bey takes up a job as a caretaker of a graveyard. I can't think of a better place to be able to take care of the mummy than in a graveyard. And at the first full moon, the mummy is fed tanna leaves, which allow him to break into the Banning residence and kill the elderly Stefan. So he's an old man recounting what happened 30 years earlier. So let's see, I'll show some photos here. This is Turhan when he's taking care. He's like, take care. The casting of Turhan Bey was pretty good, authentic, because he was of Egyptian descent, right, Court?
Yes. And so I think this is, I love Turhan Bey as the high priest. He is, I think, the most authentic. And actually, I believe Turhan Bey was Turkish. And he, and I will say this, so many people have, oh, Lon Chaney hated playing the mummy and this, that, and the other. We'll go into all that stuff. Turan Bey, whenever he was asked, and this was his favorite movie he made in the United States during his starring period, and he has always denied that. At least he said during the production of this film, he said Lon was great, and you never heard him complain about anything.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, of course he didn't. It was his favorite film. He said he didn't watch it for years, and then I think he finally caught it on TV and he said, "Oh yeah, he had nothing but fond memories of this, of the Mummy's Tomb." I was going to show a picture of Dick Foran as the old man, or here he is recounting the
There he
story.
is.
Yeah, recounting the story of how he first met the mummy and how he handled it and how he's still surviving, but only for the moment, Court. Because as I said, characters who live in one film, Kharis makes sure that they don't live to see the end of a second film. And it's funny, Babe Henson, played by Wallace Forbes, didn't they have two different names, Court, in the first film?
And Babe Anson and Steve Banning.
No, no, it was Babe Henson, and then I think it was Babe Jensen. So his last name's changed,
Oh, you know what? You are right.
right? I thought that was always peculiar.
There's forgiveness with the Mummy films, and Griffin Jay, who literally ended up with a screen credit, I believe, on oh, not on Mummy's Curse, but certainly Hand, Tomb, and Ghost. Now
Right.
there's George.
Right, and here he is playing Andoheb, but now he's turned into the other guy from the first film. It's funny how they, instead of giving him his own look, he basically morphed into the high priest. But anyway, so as I said, he instructs Andoheb instructs Turhan Bey to just make sure that Kharis continues on his killing spree, killed the Banning family, and that's
Yep.
basically what this movie is all about.
The
And
violators of the tomb.
violators of the tomb. And so Lon Chaney Jr. at this time had renewed his contract at Universal, and this was his first role as the Mummy, of course, and he would reprise it in The Mummy's Ghost and The Mummy's Curse. Court, this has got to be one of the quickest shooting schedule for a Universal film in history. I don't know if it was 2 weeks. Started early June, ended mid-June.
I think this one was made in either 12 or 14 days, and which, considering how elaborate the movie actually is with the giant fire sequence and all the rest of this stuff, is pretty impressive. And there's so many like glories in the mummy's tomb that everybody forgets about. I love the moment on the ship when Turhan Bey, I must be alone with the one I loved in life, and infidels cannot see. Where he has to feed Kairos the Tana leaves, and they leave him in the ship's hold and stuff. I think it's wonderful. Now, also for this film, for speed's sake, um, Jack Pierce began with the creation of the facial appliances and the rubber pieces, really a mask, for Lon Chaney in this movie. It's very evident in certain shots where you can see the seam around his one eye, but I think it looks great. I think Kairos is scary looking to me. So everyone's like, "Oh, you can run away and stuff." No, I'd be scared to death. I'd be standing there frozen and letting him strangle me.
That's where we have a difference of opinion, Court. I'd be hightailing it in my flip-flops uh, down the beach. Anyway, the beautiful Elise Knox, and I think that's Mark Harmon's mom, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed, it is. She's married to Tom Harmon, the great football star.
And there's that great scene where Kharis carries her through the gates of the cemetery, and she's a great heroine. They all are. I mean, these aren't big roles, but they do what's needed. I mean, they act scared. They're always going to look like an old flame of Kharis's, even though they're 3,000 years old. And his goal, as I said, is to have not a cup of Joe, have a cup of Tana.
That's
And
it.
right, and then go pick up the latest chick who looks like Princess Anaka. And so Elise Knox does a good job in the role. So let's take another quick look at George Zuko in his and Doheb makeup. What's the line again? You must give him the 3 Tana leaves.
Yeah, to sustain life, and then what? 7 for mobility.
When we discussed this before the show, 3 for mobility, 2 for dance moves, 4 to take an afternoon nap, and 6 to just make sure he's relaxed for dinner.
Well,
So,
let's just say that tending to Kairos was a full-time job for any high priest of Arkham, and but I really like this movie, and there is also one of the great unsung heroes of Universal horror. Once again, George Robinson, who photographed so many of these movies. He did a beautiful job on this film. This movie just it looks great. And when you get into Mapleton, Massachusetts, and the killing scenes, uh, particularly the very scary moment when Chaney kills Wally Ford and traps him in the alley, and Ford is throwing lumber at him and doing all that. And this was something they worked out between themselves, because Lon Chaney and Wallace Ford were extremely good friends, because it was Wallace Ford who recommended Lon Chaney to play Lenny in the West Coast stage production of Mice and Men. And that's what changed his life and his career. So They were very devoted friends. And I just think it's terrific to see them do that scary scene. And he's trying to climb up the fence and he's hitting Kharis with old tires and all types of things, and Kharis is yanking him down. And I think it's neat too, because it's like this aggressive violence of Kharis. You see that in the Mummy's Tomb. It was kind of a hallmark of the way Lon Chaney wanted to play the character, of course, because it gave him something physical to do under all those bandages. But yeah, that's a just an absolutely terrific moment. And
Yes.
for anyone, has been the burning question of what about Kairos on Super 8? Well, there's the Mummy's Tomb right there. We've got some more too, but and then
A little preview, right, Court?
yes, and then Universal 8 actually put this out in a 14-minute version, a 400 footer. That I've got that in the other room too, but the box art isn't that great.
Right. And then at the end, of course, Court with the blaze on fire. And this
Great
is what,
scene.
right, this is where he basically is why he only can limp, or not limp, but crawl with one foot and only has one eye. The villagers with those damn torches again.
And there is footage from Frankenstein that has been used here, and different, again, Harold Young with his editorial background. But this has a number of unusual things, including that plaster head of Chaney, where there Kyrus has two eyes when they shove the torch directly into his face. I think it looks cool, but it was odd that they didn't go for an exact duplication of the Chaney mask there. And one really cool scene in the Mummy's Tomb. Well, there are tons of them, but one I really like is Lon Chaney and Harold Young break the fourth wall when the killing of Mary Gordon, who plays Dick Foran's sister. And she is there, of course, Mrs. Hudson from the Sherlock Holmes movies. But Lon Chaney comes up behind her. It's very sweet, actually, because he's obviously being so delicate with her, and just puts his hand across her neck like this. And she goes like that. And then she drops out of frame, and Chaney looks directly into the camera. And the camera, kind of pushes in on him a little. I think it's great.
So that is our look at The Mummy's Tomb, the second of the Kharis films. We want to thank you so much for joining us here on Professor Lampini's podcast of horrors. This is our special look at the Kharis films of Universal from 1940 to 44. So our next look is going to be at The Mummy's Ghost, and this is with the great John Carradine, who hams it up quite a bit. And the movie is actually going well for him until his conscience starts to talk to him. And that was a big mistake. He's got Kharis guarding the door, and he decides to make a play for Princess Anaka. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, I'll read the synopsis, and then Cord will take over. This was, of course, The Mummy's Ghost. It was directed by the great Reginald Laborg. We call him Reggie. It was the second of the three sequels. And the film is the sequel to The Mummy's Tomb, where, again, Kharis plays the mummy. And Doheb, the aging high priest of Arkham. Let me show him first. I was going to jump to Carradine, but I'll show Doheb first. Okay, there he is. The aging high priest. Now, remember, this was played by, what's his name again, Court, in the early film?
Oh, Eduardo Cianelli.
Right, so now Zuko has completely taken over his role. He's the high priest of Arkham, and he summons Yosef Bey, one of the great names in Egyptian mythology and theology, to the Temple of Arkham to pass on the duties of the high priest. Meanwhile, in Mapleton, Massachusetts, Professor Matthew Norman, who examined one of Kharis's missing bandage pieces during the mummy's last spree through Mapleton, he explains the legends of the priests of Arkham and Kharis to his history class. So once again, it's another history lesson that they show. And let's get Yosef Bey, played by the great John Carradine, up there. And anyway, The class doesn't believe this hokiness. And funny thing, Court, have you ever seen a class of college kids that look like they're in their 40s?
Oh, absolutely, and they're all, I don't know. I think it's pretty beautiful looking class overall. And What I think is kind of fun too is that one of the students, they have them bring up, I think this whole thing was a sham and wasn't just an actor dressed up like a mummy. So one of the characters actually says this. And then Frank Riker, of course, Captain Englehorn, King Kong, has to say, I actually saw the creature, and so did many other people, and all this. And so I think it's great that they kind of wanted to, nip that in the bud right from the get go in the film.
That's right. It's like, has anybody really seen this? And the teacher's like, yeah, I did. I saw him myself.
Yep.
Right. So anyway, Amina Mansouri, played by my ex-wife, which is, as you know, an ongoing gag here, played by the beautiful Ramsey Ames. She's of Egyptian descent. I think they make that fact known every 45 seconds. But you're of
Yep.
Egyptian descent, huh, Amina? Yes, I am. Now, as much as I love Ramsey Ames, let's see if I can find a photo of her, she kind of sleepwalks through the role, which is fine because that's her personality. I mean, she's in a trance, obviously. I mean, you can say it's based on the script. She's in a freaking trance, so that's why maybe she sleepwalks through the role, Court.
Yeah, there's old Bob Lowry. And he's again a little too old for this. Although he actually had played a college student for Reggie LeBorg in a very small part in Weird Woman.
Oh, okay. That's
And
interesting.
he was
So,
just doing whatever they asked him to do. And hey, there's Amina. This is after her first encounter with Kharis. That's why she has the very nifty stripe in her hair.
right, and what nobody understands, there's later where they take him, Kharis is in, Yosef Bey instructs Kharis to take them up to the mill or the sawmill or whatever. But yeah, I always thought they just play off that streak. Like the boyfriend notices it, it's like, eh. And then I guess the old woman later who's watching over her notices it and goes, eh. And I'm like, no, her hair's changing color right before you. So something's going on. But she's obviously the princess. This is where I think out of all the movies, Court, this is where Princess Anaka, I mean, before the last one, she is actually the reincarnation. I mean, she's got the birthmark, her hair is changing, and of course at the end
Oh, yeah.
it's completely proven because she starts to turn into a mummy while she's being carried. We'll talk about that end. I don't want to give it away. But anyway, back in Egypt, and Doheb tells Yosef Bey that Kharis still lives, and Carradine's like, Kharis still lives? And Yosef's mission is to retrieve Kharis and the body of Ananka and return them to their rightful resting place in Egypt. I mean, does that sound so tough? So Yosef Bey pledges his devotion like they always do. Turhan had to do it. They all have to, pledge their devotion to Amun Ra and all that. And he explains, during each full moon, you must brew the fluid from 9 tanna leaves. And anyway, Kara senses this. Oh, let's get to that scene where he says that. It actually would make more sense. Here, let me do that. I'll redo that again. Okay, you must brew the fluid from 9 tanna leaves. But anyway, that very famous cup with dry ice acting as the smoke of the tanna leaves burning under a hot fire. But Kari will sense all this stuff. His nose knows. He's like Toucan Sam, Court. And wherever they are, he will know. This is the movie where every 5 minutes they say, just cook the tanna leaves and don't worry about a thing. Kharis will find it. You could be on a rooftop, in a sawmill. You could be in an underground dwelling. Kharis will find, those darn tanna leaves wherever he is. Anyway, on performing the ceremony, Kharis heads toward them, but passes Amina, who follows Kharis, as I said, in a trance-like state. And then Kharis arrives at the home of Professor Norman, strangles him, drinks the fluid, takes the tanna leaves. Amina sees Kharis, which snaps her out of her trance, and she faints. And then all of a sudden, the birthmark appears, Court. So basically, this sets the stage for the rest of the movie, where she's now a suspect in the murder of the professor. These cops are so dumb. I can't charge her, but still don't leave the city. While the
Look,
boyfriend
Miss
says, maybe,
Mansouri, I don't want to get tough, but you're in a pretty hot spot. Oh, I can. Listen, you get ready for a flood of police dialogue from this movie because I love it.
It's kind of like Dragnet. Where's Jack Webb when you least expect it? But
You don't need Jack Webb, baby. You've got Barton McLean.
Barton McLean, right? He takes over afterwards. He's from the Maltese Falcon, right, Court?
Absolutely. And
Right,
Treasure of Sierra Madre and Manpower. And oh my God. Yeah, oh, I just love Barton
right.
McLean.
So anyway, the sheriff and coroner discover a strange mold around the professor's throat, and what does that mean, Court? The mummy's back. The mummy's back, and there's gonna be trouble. Sorry, folks, I had to do it. So Yosef Bey has now arrived in Mapleton, and he calls on Amun Ra. You can't get anything done without Amun Ra. And the quest begins to brew the tanna leaves to summon Kharis almost every 10 minutes. And Kharis then kills a farmer along the way. He was bored, he had to kill a farmer. And he only kills one way, strangulation. Mostly, like this, or he grabs him around the throat like that. And anyway, so Kharis breaks into the museum, and he attempts to touch the mummified corpse of Ananka, and of course she disintegrates, and that kind of gets him kind of upset. But it's okay because they find out that Ananka's soul has been reincarnated, just so happens to be, into Amina. And then Kharis begins destroying the exhibit. And Court, tell us that famous story, what happened during the making
Okay.
of that scene.
Now there's so much
Well,
nonsense.
hold on, Court. And you can see the blood on his chin in this scene.
Yes, you can.
So tell us about it.
Okay. And I talked to Reggie LeBorg about this any number of times. And even though, memories shift a little bit and what have you, but here was the situation. This scene, John Carradine and Cheney are going to basically steal the mummified body of Princess Ananka. They reach for it, the body disappears inside the wrappings, and the spirit is now with Ramsey Ames. Okay. And Kairos goes berserk. When they were setting the scene up, there was supposed to be breakaway glass in the cabinets and also in the door. That did not happen. And so they're like, okay, Lon, just, ignore the door. We'll just have to shoot. So what he did, though, is he grabs Oscar O'Shea, and you could see Oscar O'Shea's head hits that real glass. He falls down, and Cheney had bashed his fist through the top of one of the cabinets, and the glass between that and the door had flown up and hit him in the chin. So that is Lon's blood leaking, coming through. This also belies the thing that it was just a mask and all that stuff, because Cheney didn't really care for the heavy rubber thing. It irritated his skin. So in Mummy's Ghost, it's more of a combination, much more of a combination of mask and makeup, which is why Kyrus's appearance kind of shifts from scene to scene to scene. Actually, I love the way he looks in this movie. But that when you see those spots around Cheney's chin, that's blood. That is his blood from when he broke all the glass. And there is a little streak on Oscar O'Shea's head from when his head hit the door as well. So that was kind of a rough scene. And but there's been such nonsense. Some guy on Facebook posted that the blood on Cheney's face was actually from Oscar O'Shea's skull, that it had squirted out and soaked him or something. It's ridiculous. But Lon did injure himself when he played that part. And again, he always wanted to go for something extra physical if he could, because he felt there was very little else to do with the character. And so that's what he did. And he was a big guy and a powerful guy, so he could roughhouse with the best of them.
Right, and I just showed some photos of Lon. Great one-eyed makeup, uh, obviously because he was burnt and uh, he's been just shot at. And so I mean, after a while, I mean, at least they're smart not just to make him fresh every film. He has to show some sort of degeneration of the body.
Well, also beyond the incident with Lon Chaney in the museum, this movie was fraught with another injury, and that was Aquanetta, because she was the original female lead. She was playing Amina, and her very first day, she was doing the scene where she faints on the lawn after walking in a trance after Kharis, and she hit a rock and knocked herself unconscious. So she went to the hospital, and they didn't know when she was going to recover, and so then they shifted Ramsey Ames into the part.
Right. No, I remember that. Aquanetta would have probably done a great job, but that was one of the reasons why Ramsey and I had to divorce Court. She was very upset about that. I'll never let that go. Ramsey Ames, my dream girl. Anyway,
Oh,
whose dream girl was she not? Anyway, let's take another look at Cheney carrying Ramsey Ames. And this is around the mansion. Uh, a lot of women had to be carried by Lon Chaney this way. Virginia Christine, which we'll talk about afterwards. But anyway, to finish up the plot, Inspector Walgreen sets up a trap for Kharis, who heads toward the Norman home. Amina is awakened, and he approaches and hypnotically wanders into the yard where Kharis recognizes her. And as the carrier of Ananka's soul, he faints. He carries her away. And of course, Mrs. Blake phones Tom and tells the story to Inspector Walgreen. A group of volunteers arrive. Kharis goes to the mill, and Amina wakens up, and the priest informs her that she's the reincarnation of Ananka. She doesn't believe it. She goes, "You're insane. I wish I was insane, but you're Ananka." But anyway, so this is
be
their.
bestowed with the greatest honor that can befall a woman.
um, So then, as he's about to, I guess, feed her no more injections. This is a very simple feeding tenna leaves to the mouth orally, but with a spoon. And as all he had to do is do that, and all of a sudden he gets a quote unquote hard on for Ananka. He goes, "Well, screw Kharis, I want Ananka for myself." So what happens, and rightly so. So it's kind of like the devil on the shoulder. What are you doing? And he fights it. He fights his temptation. Kind of post-code, which is kind of interesting. He has the hots for her when all he has to do is just follow Amun-Ra and what he's supposed to do. But then he decides he's going to feed her the tana leaves, but so he and Ananka can live forever. And
That's it.
while Kharis is guarding the door, he overhears this. And when one of the great funny scenes, Court, you have to admit, it almost shows like Kharis goes, "Wait, what? Huh? No, that's my woman," and he almost motions that without saying anything. It's like, what? Huh? And so he.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. No, Lon reacts. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the guy that brung her to the dance. I'm the guy who leaves with her. But nope, Carradine made his move.
Kharis comes in. And he says, "Okay, everybody's backstabbing me once again. All I want is my tana leaves and to be with my girl." So, of course, there's no choice. Of course, Kharis has to turn on Yosef Bey. "I'm sorry about this, but I'll see you down the road in the Black Sleep." So, anyway, that's what happens. He kills him. And then, I think we should talk about this for a second before we move on, Court. In one of the probably biggest downers, I think, in horror film history, Court, instead of a happy ending, Reginald Laborde went to the studio and said, "Screw a happy ending. Let's make her drown in the swamp." And the studio heads, remember, he had to fight with them. He said, "It's a great idea, but how is Kharis going to come back?" He goes, "He always can come back. He's Kharis. The girl can die, but Kharis will come back." But little did they know they would both come back. But to see her being carried into the swamp while
Yeah.
this dog doesn't stop barking, which we talked about earlier in the show. And this is a spoiler. If you're going to watch this film, get ready for a little dog that Court thinks also played Toto, right, Court?
Yeah, I've never gotten any confirmation of that. Nothing. So I commit to nothing about Peanuts.
So Peanuts is the dog that doesn't stop barking, and at one point it even annoys Kharis. But anyway, long story short, he carries Ramsey Ames, Ananka, slowly. And this, as a kid, kind of tripped me out, into the swamp, and you see her kind of go down with the bubbles, the same way Karloff did a year or two later, no, the same year, in House of Frankenstein. But it's a woman, a pretty woman who she was so innocent. She never hurt anybody. She just happened to have the misfortune of being the reincarnation of Princess Ananka. And Kharis carry. I don't know where they're going. Is there an underground, under the water, under swamp hotel? But he decides that's where they're going to be, and she's just carried away to her death while her boyfriend cries. Court, kind of a downer ending. Court.
Oh, completely. And Reg always said that he had discussed doing something like the ending of Lost Horizon. That was really what he wanted to do. And one of the writers on Mummy's Ghost was Brenda Weisberg, who I've always just been absolutely fascinated by, because here was this female screenwriter, and she's working on all these scripts for the Ben Pivar unit, and she's working on Inner Sanctum movies, and she wrote the story to the Scarlet Claw and wrote the script for one of my favorite Universal horrors, The Mad Ghoul. And I believe she actually wrote the final shooting script for The Mummy's Ghost. So she would have been the one to go ahead and include this. But I know that Reg also got into a little bit of a tiff with Ben Pivar about Kairos' first appearance, that he just kind of comes out of nowhere and actually passes over. Remember, he passes by Janet Shaw, the actress who's Millie the Maid in Night Monster and was also in Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. So it's kind of fun. All the Universal contract players once again making their appearances, whether it's Frank Riker or whoever. And but no, absolutely no assessment of the Mummy's Ghost stands without Barton McLean. That scene when he is looking at the stuff in the museum. Try to do it. First it's a living mummy, and now it's a reincarnated woman. Sounds like a bunch of applesauce to me. I love it. I just adore it. It's so great. And it's cool because it is like this kind of injection of Warner Brothers crime movie into The Mummy's Ghost. And that's just so much fun. And as you mentioned, The Black Sleep, which was Carradine, Chaney, and LeBourg again. But Lon Chaney and John Carradine made, I believe, I want to say 10 movies together. So going all the way back to their days at 20th Century Fox and Jesse James and Frontier Marshall and all that stuff, all the way to the end of their careers with things like House of Black Death and Hillbillies in a Haunted House. So there was a lot of history between those two actors. And
Yes.
once again, if you need Kharis on Super 8, what's better than a double feature of The Mummy's Tomb and The Mummy's Ghost? There it is. And this is the sound edition, too.
Wow. Once again, Court giving a sneak peek of a memorabilia that's not even on the show. But thank you, Court. Let's end this look at The Mummy's Ghost with the lobby card for it, and it's got Joseph Bey ready to do an injection into a blonde, which we forgot to mention. By the end of the movie, that white streak in her hair turns blonde, which I thought almost like a Jean Harlow Court.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Her hair turns completely white. Now, this title card is actually from the Real Art reissue. If you look at the Universal material on this film, it's very interesting because the inserts and half sheets and everything else have Kairos, but they also have Lon Chaney without makeup. And Universal used to do those cameo heads kind of throughout the posters. There is Lon Chaney just as himself. And I think that they did that probably at his insistence or his request, just to remind people that it is actually him playing this part because he's unrecognizable.
Right. Of course. And with that, we end our look at The Mummy's Ghost. And so the fourth film in the series, and the final one before, if you want to look at the fifth unofficial one, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, which is an episode all to its own. Court, you can have the studio and the stage for that one when we do that one. But anyway, Right, yay. The Mummy's Curse. Actually, it's a fun film. The Mummy's Curse is the fourth and last film in the series. And I'm going to start. The first thing I'm going to say about this film is one thing, Court. Hey, you!
Oh, yeah. There's Tonka Bert.
So this is a famous, the person who produced this film,
Oliver
and
Drake.
Oliver Drake, yes, is all over this. His stamp is on this. He he produced it. He did the music. He's really a one man show. What do you know about? I've never heard of him until I rewatched this court.
Well, Oliver Drake's primary career was really as a writer and producer of westerns, lots of movies at Monogram and what have you. He moved over to Universal as a utility producer under Ben Pivar. He produced an Inner Sanctum film, and he did The Mummy's Curse. But he also introduced Lon Chaney Jr. to his wife Patsy.
Oh, okay. Well,
And but he was a songwriter, and he worked a lot with Gene Autry and people like that. So, but his almost entire canon were B westerns, and quite good ones.
right.
And
Because I just remember seeing his name all over the credits on this film. So
yep,
anyway, it's a little different. It's got, as I said, different music. It's almost like a Warner Brothers film, Court. It really didn't have, out of all the Mummy films, this one was the least like a universal. I mean, they all were universal and atmospheric, but this one seemed a little off. It had a little bit of music. The music was different. I had just a little bit of familiar universal can music, Court. As I said, because perhaps of Drake. But we're going to discuss this film, and I'll talk about the synopses, and Court will give his assessment of it. The Mummy's Curse, 1944, is obviously Universal, directed by Leslie Goodwins, and it's the third and final sequel to The Mummy's Hand. Remember, it's not related to the original Mummy. So it came out in 44, so you had two movies, Ghost and Curse. And it marks Lon Chaney's final appearance as Kharis, the Egyptian mummy. And the action in this film, which continues the story of Kharis and his beloved Princess Anaka, is supposed to take place in the same swampy location that was the setting for the mummy's ghost. The problem is, it went from rural Massachusetts to the Cajun and the bayous, which is very interesting. Everybody has a Cajun accent, and it's kind of, they just changed the setting without even skipping a beat or blinking an eye. It's like, yeah, the last film, they went into the swamp in Massachusetts, and in this one, we're in the Cajun bayous of Louisiana. The plot is, basically, is that Louisiana swamp company or excavation company wants to drain the local drain the local swamp for the public good, but the efforts are being hampered by the superstitions of the local workers who believe the place is haunted because the mummy and his bride walked down in there 25 years ago in the previous movie. Anyway, so two representatives from that famous Scripps Museum, James Halsey, played by Dennis Moore, and Dr. Ilzor Zandab, played by Peter Coe, arrive on the scene. When I was younger, Court, I used to confuse Peter Coe with Turhan Bey. Is that only me, or you as
no,
well?
I've Peter Coe's okay. He's got the little mustache and stuff, but actually, I find him the least interesting of the high priests, quite honestly.
So anyway, they want to drain the swamp. The guy who runs the swamp, Pat Walsh, played by Addison Richards, doesn't want to hear anything about superstitions. He wants all the workers to work. That's the way it always is, Court. Stop yelling and get back to work. And but of course the Cajuns, and the movie's supposed to take place, I guess, 25 years afterwards. So it'd be like, what, 1968, 69? So, but once again, Universal just plays with that time frame. They're back still in the 40s. And anyway, so later that evening, Zandab sneaks into the swamp and meets Martin Koslick, the great Martin Koslick, who's in a lot of these Universal films, and they're both disciples of the Arkham sect. And Zandab is secretly a high priest. And of course, there was a worker who was killed That sets the stage. But he was not killed by Kharis, but killed with a knife in the back, I think, to keep him quiet. So, they didn't want to disturb Kharis and Ananka, but it's too late. The picture I showed earlier, and I'll show it one more time, is of Virginia Christine as playing Princess Ananka. And there's a great story to share, told me by the great Robert Aragon, illustrator and artist. And he said during this scene, they actually, when she emerges from the dirt, they actually buried her for about an hour during lunchtime with 2 straws sticking out of her nose. And they were going for realism. And that's why when they all came back, she said, I'm only doing this in one take. I'm not feeling good. And so they said action. And that whole entire scene, even though they cut away, when she emerges and gets up and shakes off the dirt and she walks very awkwardly with weird twitches, that was real. She was shaking. She was spasming. And it's one of the great, great emerging horror scenes where her hand pops out, predating Evil Dead or any film like that for a shock sequence. And so she takes a little trek down the swamp, and it keeps showing the sun and then her, and then she starts walking slower and slower until she gets she feels better, and then she walks in the swamp and kind of washes all that off. That's just, Court, give me your take on that scene. That is just where she emerges from the dirt or she sticks her arms out. I don't think any other actress during this time period endured something like this.
No, I mean, this is the thing with the Mummy's Curse. I mean, there are some particular highlights to this movie which are, absolutely wonderful. Include some of the best scenes they did with these characters in the Mummy franchise. Unfortunately, they are also surrounded by some of the lousiest scenes in any of the movies.
Like what? What's a lousy scene?
Oh my God, Dennis Moore stinks. Okay. Okay, he's horrible. And all this, God, is horrible. And that scene, what the hell Leslie Goodwin was thinking when Kharis comes out, and this is the bad Kharis scene, when he comes out of the woods and they pick up Virginia Christine on the side of the road, and he's like 4 feet away, and he's kind of going like this, and they don't even recognize. Nobody even looks in the rearview mirror to see there's a monster standing there. It's terrible. Just drives me nuts. But then that's all offset with those great scenes in the temple and the great resurrection scene with Virginia Christine and all of that stuff. And I love Kurt Catch, all you good for is wash a dish. I love that stuff. But yeah, but Dennis Moore, and he looks stupid in the pith helmet.
Oh yeah, that guy is great. The guy who gets strangled later. I guess he's
Kurt
one of the
Catch.
head, one of the
Yep.
head, right? He's like the head foreman or something like that.
Yep.
And you're right. It's just he reaches for them and just misses. So he just misses grabbing her, and nobody sees him.
It's ridiculous. But then you've got these wonderful other moments. It's just so up and down. And of course, this movie, when they were shooting in the temple scenes, and you had William Farnham playing the Saracen who was guarding the old temple, this was a very famous legend behind the shooting of that scene, was that Lon Chaney dressed as Kharis. I don't believe that was true. I think he just went in his street clothes, confronted a Universal executive, Ford Farnham, and said, look, this guy is being treated very disrespectfully. He was a very good friend of my father's. You get him a star chair and make sure that he is treated well on this thing, even though he's playing this tiny bit part. This guy was a huge star in silent pictures, which was true. And everybody, Peter Coe, everyone has verified that story, that Chaney did that.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. It should get earned respect for an elderly actor who paid his dues.
Yep.
So moving on. So it's basically the same thing. The same plot. Basic plot is all of them. Kharis is trying to, we're getting back in touch with Princess Ananka, and this time played by Virginia Christine. As I said, she rises from the swamp, and after a bulldozer excavation, and she can't speak very much as she starts to. She's taken into town court, but some very spooky scenes at that hotel, very atmospheric, like the one where Kharis is at the back door.
Oh, he's pounding on it and all that. Oh yeah,
Right,
I I love that moment. And when when he breaks in and Tante Bert is strangled and all of that. Oh yeah, just wonderful. And Virginia, and I would say the reviews at the time, of course, all said who would not pursue Virginia Christine over thousands of years. You know, you'd have to be crazy not to.
right. And then let's talk about who played. What was the girl's name who played the contractor's niece, the
Oh, Kay
secretary?
Harding. I
Kay
like Kay.
Hart, right?
Yeah, Kay Harding.
Yeah, from
And
the Sherlock Holmes movies,
she was in the Scarlet Claw. Absolutely, she played the tavern owner's daughter who gets murdered.
right?
And that's one thing they did do in this one, which, by the way, I mean, Ted Richmond, who became a huge producer, worked on the script for this. And I always think, well, wow, from the producer of Veal Rides with Robert Mitchum and Charles Bronson and Red Sun, you know, comes The Mummy's Curse. But this is the only mummy picture where they have split kind of everybody's romantic focus in two. You have Kay Harding, and suddenly Martin Koslick wants to jump all over her. And also you've got the situation with the Princess Ananka. So for once, you actually have two female leads. Who's going to be reincarnated? Who's going to be asked to live forever and, you know, in eternity with the high priest of Arkham? You got kind of a, you know, lots of pickings this time.
Right. And this is a great scene where Marty watches. Now, this scene I remember as a kid, and I remember it as an adult. Kharis is just loving that castor oil, I mean tanna leaves, and he's enjoying it, and it's like almost like Campbell's soup. And he's slurping on it and slurping on it, and then after he's done, he looks right at Marty Koslick. It's just a weird scene. They kind of like have eye contact. Do you remember that scene? They're like looking at each other, Court, for like 15, 20 seconds. Does he want to kill him, smack him? And then he just walks by him. Isn't that a weird scene?
It is a weird scene, but it directly reflects their relationship. Koslick and Cheney despised each other. And, uh, you know, they had also been in The Frozen Ghost together. I certainly talked to Martin Koslick about it, and you know, oh, I loathed him. Yeah, they did not get along, and Cheney was a big man, and he would kind of bully Martin Koslick around a little bit. In fact, I think it is this scene where he like turns around and faces Koslick. In one take, he had his hand up and accidentally slapped Martin Koslick across the face. It wasn't hard, but Koslick was convinced he did it deliberately, and yeah, they did not get along at all. So later on, when Kyrus really goes after Rudy, then is that what's his name in the movie?
Oh, Rudy?
Yeah,
Who plays Rudy?
is that no Martin Koslick's name?
Oh, Martin Koslick he plays Rageb.
Rageb. I'm sorry. Yeah, Rudy was the frozen ghost, and so when Cheney goes after Rageb, I mean that's some of the best mummy action in any of the movies. But he was, you know, he wanted to strangle Marty Koslick for real, and brought that to to bear in his performance.
Of course, the ending is like most of the endings. Uh, Rageb and Peter Coe, the high priest, get into an argument because I guess Marty says, "But I'm also human." And he says, "You'll pay for this. Your eyes will be scratched out and snakes will eat your bones." He goes, "I don't care." and and they get into a fight, and then here's some twist: as opposed to the high priest coming up on top court, it's the lowly, I guess, servant Marty who grabs the knife and kills the high priest.
Oh yeah, he goes after everybody, and it's kind of, and Kay Harding's reaction is not exactly, well, you were almost raped, and you watch this guy slaughter a bunch of people, and you're kind of very nonchalant about it. And but there's a lobby card, and I have it. It's framed in the other room, with the entire cast looking down at the mummified body of Virginia Christine, which returns to its mummified state after Kharis is dead and or destroyed, and all the other stuff has happened to break the spell and complete the reincarnation. And that scene is given kind of short shrift in the movie, which is kind of odd because that's kind of what the whole thing has really been about. And it's just a brief little moment. And then with the room littered with corpses there at the end, Kay Harding and the archaeologist walk out going, "Hey, we'll see you later. We're going to go get married." Yeah, get out of here. It really bugs me. So
He says, the boss says, "Yeah, take her away from me. She was a lousy secretary," and the happy ending,
you bet.
kind of
Oh,
like,
everybody's, yeah.
yeah, kind of like when Lon and Martha O'Driscoll go off into the sunset after,
No, but that had emotional power.
right. Well, it was,
Uh-oh.
what order, Court, do you think you should watch the films when you watch them? In order, or does it matter? Go out of order and pick your favorite?
I think literally, as with all the value and the cool stuff in the mummy's hand, if you were to skip that and just start with the mummy's tomb, and there are all those wonderful flashback highlights of the mummy's hand, you would kind of see it. So I think Mummy's Tomb, that really is my favorite. And then and Mummy's Ghost, of course, with all the great Kyra scenes and Ramsey Ames, good lord. And then Mummy's Curse, tools along. And again, you're talking about a movie that I'm sitting here railing and, abject universal indignation and all that stuff. I've probably seen this movie 30 times. So, what am I talking about?
Right. Now, the mummy's ghost, as I said, I think the mummy's hand is the best made, but the mummy's curse is my favorite.
And don't forget, the Mummy's Ghost has got that great uh, death scene of the farmer, and you see the camera. Reggie LeBorg just pans the camera over, and you see where he blasted through the barn wall. That's really cool. And also, and like in Mummy's Tomb, as one of the great Kyra shots, that wonderful low angle, George Robinson, of Cheney breaking through the fence.
Right.
And he's off. And that is, by the way, Glenn Strange is the farmer trying to control the horse.
Oh, okay. So, as I said, that was our look at the four Mummy Kharis movies. Cord, any closing remarks about today's show?
Just, you know, love Kyrus for who he is. I think that's it. It's the and also actually, Jay, you hit on something in all seriousness that these were considered kind of throwaway movies. Lon Chaney himself didn't have the greatest opinion of the content of the Mummy pictures, although he seemed to like the Mummy's Tomb. But these movies have endured. That's the bizarre thing, that these were product to be shut out the door, and here comes the next group of product, and that's going out the door. And these movies have always struck a chord, and they have remained popular, which seemed absolutely incongruous to the people who were making them. So that's it. That's the magic of them.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I actually prefer them than not prefer them. Where would we be without the Kharis Mummy movies? They serve a purpose. They're spooky, haunting, atmospheric, noirish. There's something special about them. Yes, they're not Frankenstein, Dracula, or the Wolfman. They're Universal mummy movies from the 40s. They're just kind of cool. And you just lay back and have some popcorn. And, Court, they're short. I mean, one is 72 minutes, but for the most part, they're a little bit over an hour. So they're harmless fun. I mean, I really dig the mummy movies. They have a life of their own. I want to thank everybody for watching. As always, Boris will take us out.
Drink Tana leaves, as many as possible, and then see what happens in the afterlife.
Thank you for joining us. Join us next time when we'll cover other topics like universal horror, Poverty Row, and profiles on people like Bela Lugosi, John Carradine, Peter Lorre, and even on myself. Until next time, stay scared.